Hello, welcome to chapter 10. This is 10 and 11 this week, both chapters, but each chapter only has one set of questions, so that's a normal set of questions. Just a quick review, we'll do chapter 10 and I'll do a separate video for chapter 11. But this is the nutrients and phytochemicals, as you can see. And one of the first things to learn about antioxidants, which is the main focus of this chapter, is that oxidation is something that naturally occurs in our bodies, in the cells of different fruits and vegetables. So here's an example of an apple. When you cut an apple, oxidation occurs unless you put the apple in vitamin C, as you see here. If you put it in a vitamin C solution, that actually stops the browning. The browning is the result of oxygen forming with some of the cells inside of the apple. So we can prevent oxidation or have an antioxidant by putting it in vitamin C, and even in some sugar solutions. You can see the bubble water has a little sugar, honey has a little sugar, even in salt solution, but anything but just the air, because the oxygen from the air, it reacts with this ingredients of the cell. So that's just kind of an example of what happens inside of our bodies, which is why we want to make sure we have a diet that's high in antioxidants so our cells aren't destroyed. So oxidation is just when we have the movement of electrons from one molecule to another. You always want a pair of electrons. They always run in pairs, if you remember from chemistry. If you have an uneven pair, like only one, an uneven set where you only have one electron instead of two, that's a radical, a free radical, and that's unstable. So there's always this movement to make sure that there's a pair of electrons. Maybe several pairs around each molecule. So a molecule can be oxidized or reduced depending on whether or not where the electrons move. You might remember from high school this idea that oxidizing is when you lose electrons, reduction is when you gain electrons. So these reactions are going on all the time in our cells as part of our normal metabolism. There's nothing really wrong with it. The problem is when we have too many oxidants. So because of the environment, if we have pesticides, pollution, just running your lawnmower and breathing in the exhaust is a stress to your body. Not getting enough sleep is an oxidative stress. Over-exercising is an oxidative stress. Here's some examples from other ones. For instance, extra ultraviolet rays, stress, poor nutrition. Some of these are other examples of oxidative stress that puts this causes this damage in your cells. It can damage cell membranes. You see here that when the uneven paired molecule comes along, it actually causes destruction of DNA. It can destroy the lipoproteins or the cell membranes in your cells, the proteins, the DNA. So too much oxidative stress can be maybe what they're thinking could lead to some of the causes of cancer. So what does nutrition have to do with oxidation, oxidative stress? Is that there are antioxidants in our diets. Vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals are all examples of antioxidants that help control the number of free radicals in our metabolism. So they work in three different ways. The antioxidants can be vitamins. So the vitamins donate electrons or hydrogen atoms to stabilize, make sure there's a pair of electrons always. So the vitamins can allow the donation of electrons. And then antioxidant minerals, these work a little differently. These work as coenzymes. If you recall back in the protein chapter, we had this idea that enzymes often need a cofactor, which are often the minerals that need to work with the enzyme in order for it to be effective. So the minerals are important to work with these enzyme systems that will prevent damage, or at least limit the damage to our cells, to the proteins and the lipids in our cells. And then the phytochemicals is another interesting category of antioxidants, and these are chemicals that are naturally in plants. They're in plants to help the plant survive under high UV stress. Some of the flavors of plants are deleterious to different insects. Insects don't go near certain plants because of the smells and the flavors of those plants. Those are protective chemicals in plants that also help us when we ingest them to stabilize free radicals, to prevent damage of our cells. So those are three categories of antioxidants. And then if you want to look at that a little more closely, if you have free radicals, we can reduce the number of free radicals by eating antioxidants. Vitamins and phytochemicals are often, the C and E are the most common vitamins that work as antioxidants. The most common phytochemicals that we're familiar with are these carotenoids, which are the orange colors you see in fruits and vegetables, beta carotene. And then the antioxidants that are cofactors are the minerals. Which minerals? The minerals that are most commonly thought of as antioxidants are selenium, zinc, copper, iron, and manganese. And we'll probably pretty much just talk about selenium in this chapter. So those are the antioxidants, and those are their functions and why nutrition is important. The other interesting thing about antioxidants is that they actually add antioxidants to food. So when you buy bread, for instance, they add what they call BHT. You can see it here, or BHA, which are basically chemicals that act as antioxidants. Otherwise, your breads would spoil much quicker. They would turn rancid because the fats in our food products become rancid over time because of oxidation. So instead of the color changing like they did in the apple, the flavor will change over time. We talked about that already. That's why margarine was so popular, because they could take oils which are easily oxidized and add hydrogenated oils, if you remember, that made it a partial solid, and those were not as quick to become rancid. So it preserves odor, color, and flavor. So rancid fats, if you've ever had them, they have an off flavor, off color, and off odor. So you'll often see this added to baked goods, snacks, crackers, that kind of thing. So that's a synthetic antioxidant. That's an additive. So what is the specific vitamins? Then we can just talk briefly that the first one we mentioned was vitamin E. So vitamin E as an antioxidant. Vitamin E, you remember, is a fat-soluble vitamin, but it's also an antioxidant, so it's important. That's why we're not trying not to limit the amount of fat as we used to. Even for weight control, we should still have a relatively high-fat diet, because without fat, we can't absorb these fat-soluble vitamins. So you need to have a fat source in your diet. But the best source of vitamin E is actually the fats that are from plants. So any oil that's made from plants, safflower oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, those all have vitamin E in them. And what does vitamin E do? It stabilizes the cells. It's an antioxidant, preventing the breakdown of lipid destruction. So remember, the phospholipid double membrane of all your cells is really important to maintain the structure of a cell. If that is destroyed, then your cell basically commits suicide. You don't have the cell functioning anymore. So you need the vitamin E to maintain the cell membrane. It's especially important for certain parts of your body. Think about the parts that take in a lot of oxygen. So think of oxidation. So of course your red blood cells carry oxygen. Your lungs have a lot of oxygen. So those cells in particular are very benefited from vitamin E. So where do we get vitamin E in our bodies? It is in these foods. There's a list of foods here. Sunflower seeds, sunflower oil, almonds. So think of all the nuts, the plant-based oily nuts. Safflower oil, wheat germ, that's the part of the wheat kernel that has the most vitamins and the highest fat. So if you can buy a jar of wheat germ, that's very high in vitamin E. Also, you can get it in any of the oils. Mayonnaise, if it's made from oil. Avocados, which is a plant-based, all these have high vitamin E. So those are good sources of vitamin E. The next vitamin that we discuss in this chapter, and there's more slides in between you can look at later, but vitamin C, or ascorbic acid is the other name for it, is another antioxidant. It has another interesting role, that it regenerates vitamin E. So as vitamin E donates its electrons to free radicals, vitamin C comes along right behind it and gives back electrons to vitamin E so that it can maintain its antioxidant quality. So it's very important to have vitamin C to maintain the function of vitamin E. And so we'll look at some of the sources of vitamin C, but first let's look at the function of vitamin C. Just briefly here, there's quite a few functions, but we mentioned it's an antioxidant. Another thing that's very important about vitamin C is that if you are aware that collagen is a protein, and we might have learned this, I think we did talk about it in the protein chapter, It's like a three-string rope, like the three-stranded rope, but it's all protein strands. So it's very strong structure of protein. And it's the basis for basically your whole body. Any tissue, your skin, your bones, everything is made up of this kind of foundational protein called collagen. Well, it turns out that vitamin C is part of the cross bonding between the different strands of this collagen. So without vitamin C, collagen breaks down. Well, that will help you understand why the disease scurvy occurs. Scurvy, if you recall from maybe your history books, I have a picture in a minute, causes the breakdown of your tissues. Like here's an example. Here is the first thing you see, the bleeding gums, and then later loose teeth and teeth falling out. But that's just one of the first signs. You also might see joint and muscle pain, drying skin. And you'll learn here that in this slide that, this scurvy was discovered by Dr. Lind in the 1700s, but people at first didn't really believe that that he'd found anything. And you'll read, if you want to watch these videos, it explains a little about how hard it was for him to prove that vitamin C really was the cause of scurvy. And even the words vitamin C, the ascorbic, I'll go back there, ascorbic, that means against scurvy. So this whole word is trying to tell you that vitamin C will prevent scurvy. It also enhances our immune system, protects our white blood cells from oxidation. We need our white blood cells, obviously, to fight off immunity, which is why they say, and I think it's been proven, that it can at least, by taking vitamin C, decrease your severity of colds because it increases your immunity, your white blood cell structure, so that it can fight off bacteria. We mentioned already that it can regenerate vitamin E after it's lost some electrons in its antioxidant formation. Also, vitamin C helps with iron absorption. That's a whole separate thing, but you can become anemic if you don't have enough vitamin C because you need C with iron to help for that absorption. It helps transport fatty acids. It's a function in our serotonin, in our brain function, and it may help with the decreasing the formation of carcinogens. So quite a few functions for vitamin C. So where do we get vitamin C? Well, here's if we don't get, so sorry, we already talked about this not getting enough. So it does affect joints, our nails, bones and muscles. You'll have a lot of pain. So for instance, if you really were to read about the original scurvy on these ships that the men suffered, this is the collagen structure, by the way, the three strands that we talked about. You might first just see these signs of weakness, weight loss, a little muscle pain. But as it develops and you don't have vitamin C, as the connective tissue or the collagen breaks down, you get swollen gums, easily bleeding, and eventually, as the last part of it, your teeth become loose. But even then, you have become infections. You get infections in your skin, wounds that don't heal, discoloration. Here's an example of hemorrhages where the breakdown of your capillaries causes what looks like a rash, but it's actually, it's actually a vitamin C deficiency. So vitamin C, obviously, is very important. If we get too much vitamin C, there's just a little bit of a, it's a water-soluble vitamin, so it's not particularly dangerous, but there is some possibility that if you take 10 times the RDA vitamin C, you could get diarrhea. So the first thing you might notice, you have soft stool, and think, oh, maybe I'm taking too much vitamin C, but it could lead to kidney stone formation. But they see that only occurs when people already have kidney disease. So it's really just causing extra bleeding, a little bit of nausea if you take too much. And it also, in a higher dose, can causes a pro-oxidant. Actually, it's like a free radical. It forms more free radicals. So taking too much isn't necessarily best, which is why they have a UL, or the upper limit, of 2,000 milligrams a day. If you happen to have this genetic disease, which is called hemochromatosis, that means that your body absorbs too much iron. Just your genetic deformity means your body absorbs a lot of iron. So if you were to take vitamin C when you have this disease, you would absorb even more iron, and iron can become toxic. So that's just one situation where someone be careful not to take too much. So let's just look at one other aspect then of an antioxidant. This one we'll look at as a carotenoid. So carotenoids, the other thing we mentioned, are provitamins, which means they're not actually a vitamin. They can become a vitamin. They can be turned into a vitamin. So it's safe to take a high quantity of a provitamin, such as carotenoids, because it hasn't formed the active form or the preformed vitamin A. Vitamin A can be toxic because it is a fat-soluble vitamin, but the